cultures around the world is that they all value connection to nature and animals as teachers and nature as teacher. And so in our first group meeting that we had in March, we had an event before that. We had an in-person event in the Bronx before that. That was our first event. But when we actually really sat down as a group and had new people and got together, the guidance card that we got was a turtle card, the sea turtle. And then a couple of months later in May, in the dream space, we received turtle again. And turtle deals with patience. It deals with taking time and letting things blossom over time. It deals with security and shelter and creating spaces that are built on strong foundations. We want IMHANI to be built on a strong foundation. And IMHANI is also built on faith, because the acronym happens to sound like IMHANI, the Kwanzaa Swahili principle that a lot of African people and Black people around the world recognize as a guiding factor in our liberation, being able to see beyond today, being able to see beyond the mental health disparities that we're facing, the carceral states and policing states that people experience in mental health field, the racism, the sexism, the queerphobia that people experience. We are having faith and acting on that faith and those visions of creating more Indigenous-centered healing spaces. So I'm, again, grateful to be here. I want to just introduce myself and also introduce Antara, who's also been very instrumental in this event, and also Angie. She's been having a lot going on with me, but I think they may be here later. Also been very instrumental in IMHANI. So I am a trauma-informed peer support facilitator and instructor. I'm also a sound healer. I'm also an astrologer and budding medium. Okay, Angie's here, great, great. So I come with that lens to IMHANI. I find that spirituality and Indigenous modalities are very helpful in understanding the mental health of BIPOC people and marginalized people, to everybody, but especially those groups who've been denied access to these practices because of laws, because of colonization, because of slavery, because of so many things that have attacked these practices. And at IMHANI, we are trying to bring that back in. And I chose the title of visionary seeder as opposed to director and all these things I was playing around about in the beginning, because of my past leadership experiences at certain points. Some of them were pretty good. I've been in groups since I was in high school, different groups and clubs, but some of them, people lost sight of the vision as time went on and as we did certain projects. And I find that when people are centered on the shared vision and the seed that they planted together and they don't forget that, it helps to serve as a reminder when challenges may come. So that's why I chose the title of Visionary Seeder. And Antara helps with our communications and is a technical guide. So I just want to give Antara a little bit of space to introduce themselves, why they came to IMHANI, why they're passionate about mental health, things of that nature. Go ahead, Antara.
Hi guys, thank you for coming. Like Almina said, my name is Antara. I would say that my title is an artist and medicine woman. The medicine that I use is art, jewelry, and plants. The reason that I came to IMHANI would be because I would say as an artist, like spirituality and just like dreams and visions always were like a part of my practice. And I didn't ever feel like there was like a space or a way to talk about it. And like, as I'm learning a lot about myself this year, that is starting to make more sense. Yeah, and I wanted to be more like a more openness about using holistic health, like holistic health modalities to like heal people mentally and physically, and to for people to just like express themselves, and the overlap between that and art. So yeah, that's all I have to say. Angelica also is here, right?
Yes, Angie, you can go ahead. And Angie, we have different principles and themes in IMHANI, which I'll touch on in a second. And Angie helps a lot with the Sankofa principle, which deals with loving reclamation and going back to ancestral ways and reclaiming them and transforming them in the present. So that's our loving reclamation principles, also tied into the concept of re-indigenization, of bringing, resurrecting indigenous healing practices that have come forth through us, that are been calling us. So Angie, you can go ahead and just give a brief intro on who you are and why you're here, what you do.
Hi, everyone. I'm Angie. My pronouns are she and they. Thank you to all folks that are here. I apologize for any of the background noise, but yes, I'm the community outreach person at IMHANI, and I joined this group because Almina wrote to me and introduced me to this whole beautiful vision that she had, and we were able to just like carry out that vision through like literally talking and gathering with folks. I think she said since March of last year. So it's interesting as well to like work through this while going through like a pandemic. But I think it's necessary during this time to center Indigenous practices. And a lot of the work that I do is around, I guess, some form of like oracle, divination, tarot, readings, also dream work, as Antara was saying, and really channeling spirit and using spirituality as another means of unpacking the world around us. So I'm really grateful that we're here, and yeah.
So happy that you're here too. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just saying, I thought you were muted.
Oh, okay, yeah, I was for a second there. So I want to just touch on our principle for today and some of our other IMHANI principles. Kapwa, it is an indigenous principle from indigenous tribes in the Philippines, and it's a concept that helps us understand relationships and relating and interconnectedness. And this is a theme that we see in indigenous cultures across the world. And it's important for me, if we are, going to be doing an organization that is centered on indigenous healing, to use these terms and to use them with respect. I am a first generation American born to an African immigrant family from Cameroon. So my family's Cameroonian, and I also have a little bit of Togolese in my bloodline too, but it comes out very strongly spiritually for some reason. And the name of my spiritual practice is Mulema alchemy. And that is the centering of the term of heart, Mulema meaning heart, in Bimbia, which is one of my mom's native languages. And I think the power of language and words and understanding the vibration behind these words and centering them is so important. The proverb that goes with Mulema alchemy is Dutu Yasea Tibobe, which means not all bad things are always bad. So like, even when things are painful or even when things look like they're going a bad way, you can still learn from the situation, and you can tap into Mulema, that heart space, to try and overcome what you're going through. And we can tap into that heart space a lot through relationships. And in the Western world, we've been conditioned to value romantic relationships over other types of relating, but from an Indigenous perspective, all relationships are so important. Your family and also community, and even the concept of family, which I've been sharing recently on my Instagram page. It's not just, relationships to your mom, your dad, your immediate siblings that you live with. It is your cousins, it is your neighbors, it is your friends, it is the people down the road. It's community. That's interconnectedness. That's Kapwa, right? And there's also interconnectedness in relationship to nature, right? To the elements and how we affect nature and nature affects us. And this is a very important thing to understand when you are going through a healing process. And mental health from an Indigenous perspective is holistic. So it includes, physical health, spiritual health, and all of that. But we chose to center mental health in the IMHANI title because we have noticed a lot of times when people say holistic, there's a connotation for it to mean things like yoga or to things that are more into the physical body in a way that sometimes dismisses things that happen on a mental level. Sometimes people use those practices to like bypass certain mental things. Even in our society, even when mental health is paid attention to, sometimes it's just like depression or anxiety that is paid attention to. The things like bipolar or schizophrenia or those types of things, which often require a lot more work on both the physical, spiritual, and all these other things, and like in different ways. Those things are more stigmatized, and those are areas that we also wanted to call attention to, which is why when it comes for this Western understanding of people need to know what was going on there, we're also speaking to that, right? So Kapwa's interconnectedness, it deals with understanding relationships among ideas, among people, among things. And it's very important when it comes to healing to have an understanding of layers and interconnectedness, because that's what a holistic approach takes. Our other principles at Sankofa, I talked about that earlier, that's comes from the Akan people of West Africa, of reclaiming your ancestral ways in a loving way, re-indigenizing and transforming those ways in the present, and really being unapologetic about these practices, which have been demonized, which have been misunderstood, and which have also been seen as inferior. I made an announcement on my Instagram page yesterday that I have known about for a little while, but only like my friends and family have known about it. I had not shared it before publicly, but I feel like with IMHANI coming together today, this would be an appropriate time to share it, especially in regards to what IMHANI does in the direction we are going forward. I have my background, I share that I'm a trauma-informed facilitator and instructor, but my background academically, I have an undergraduate degree. I got my degree from Howard University, political science, and minored in psychology. And then I went to University of District of Columbia to get a postdoc in psychology. So I technically have 2 undergrad degrees in a way. And then this past fall, started school at FAMU, Florida Agricultural Mechanical University, another HBCU, but one whose psychology program, community psychology program, is really African centered, and which I was really resonating with. There was a lot of spiritual synchronicities and different things, even my professors at Howard, that brought me to that space. But I decided that I'm gonna have to drop out of school because of the ways in which, not because of what was happening at school per se. My professors, many of which are, they are very interested in Indigenous methods of healing. Some of them are in Indigenous African traditions. They are in the Association of Black Psychologists that uplift these practices, but there are systemic things in the field that we have to adhere to that my ancestors spiritually in me were not vibing with, and that I also personally was not vibing with. And I realized, especially looking into astrocartography, which is astrology of like a place in a person's chart, that the city that FAMU is on can activate healing initiations in my chart and where clarity and awareness about spiritual energy and purpose. So I was supposed to come to FAMU, I was supposed to come to this land and connect with these people here to do this work, but not in the academic way that I thought, because there was some ways in which the indigenous medicines and frameworks and psychological frameworks was at odds very strongly. And it was kind of draining for me to kind of have these inner battles between the field and the systems that are set up for licensure and all these things. And some of the indigenous practices that I have to spend a lot of time to do each day. And so I'm learning that my path is to do more, indigenous facilitation of healing circles and work like that. And also the astrology, also the mediumship, also the sound healing, things that I've been doing and things that I knew, but I was not doing them enough in a sense. So I'm going to have to put my energy more into doing that on a more bigger basis than I originally thought, just expanding what I was already doing. And school was kind of getting in the way of that. It was even getting in the way of me trying to show up for IMHANI in certain ways and show up for astrology more deeply and mediumship and all these things. So I don't think that everybody who's in academia or who is still in the mental health field is making a mistake or whatever. I'm not going to project what my personal path is on other people. We've had in our past events, former professors of mine who are psychologists who are still doing research on people of color that is helping our communities, who are still, helping their clients and bringing healing to them. So everybody has their path and their places that they're supposed to be, and IMHANI is a meeting space for that, right? So IMHANI works with both, people who may have been trained in the Western mental health models. They have the license, they have the therapy license, they have all of these things, but also uplifting the community healers and the indigenous healers who have been overlooked, right? A lot of times people say, well, oh, that stuff is maybe therapeutic and it feels nice, but not all therapy is healing. That's a quote from Dr. Thomas Parham, Association of Black Psychologists past president. And people are so quick because of the ethics and the expectations that we've been conditioned to other Western models to default to having to go to a Western trained person to deal with all of these things all the time. But what they don't realize in certain ways is that they are dismissing the validity of indigenous psychologies and the community healers and the indigenous healers in the hood, on the reservations, in the global South, where a psychologist is not available, a social worker is not available, right? So we have to have balance for both of these things, and IMHANI is a space for that. And I just wanted to name that. And so I could talk about these kinds of things all day, but we do have to move it along a bit. I'm going to do a libation, and then we'll get into our next speaker, an ancestral honoring and a spiritual honoring of the ancestral guides who have brought us here. So I had to put my phone down for this. But I will, hold on one second, please. Okay. So I've got here a mug that has tea in it, and a libation honoring of ancestors is something that's done in indigenous cultures all around the world, and is basically honoring and being thankful for their presence. We don't believe that death is the end. We don't believe that, intercessors and guides only take a Western form. We believe that God created many paths to spirit and support, and that expression of God's support is reflected in nature, and it's been reflected in our ancestors connected to us in so many ways. And so I just want to speak into this water, and then I will, at the end of this event, pour it outside the tree, the earth dear tree. This is something that was taught to me by Mother Hafia, a dear indigenous Ghanaian healer who first helped me facilitate healing circles at Howard University, my senior year of Howard University. When I started doing healing circles, she was helping me and showing me the ropes of stuff. And I was familiar with the concept of water being a very receptive element from studying astrology and mysticism, and that if you talk to water, there have been like experiments that show that the water listens and it responds to the on a molecular level to what you're saying. So like if you say things like, you know, this water is poor, this water is ugly, on a molecular level, the molecules can move to look deformed. Versus if you say kind things to the water, the molecular levels under a microscope of the water actually look like snowflakes and they look really beautiful and ornate. And so this connection to water and the elements show that they're alive, that God's spirit is in them and that they can help us understand healing messages and transmit healing messages and charge messages. And so I just want to speak into this water and say thank you to my ancestral and soul family guides who've gotten me here, to Angie and Antara's guides, to anybody who in any way has felt called to IMHANI's mission. And I affirm and I'm grateful for the guidance and the energies that got you here. I'm grateful for all of our speakers today. Veronica, Nina, JL, and your beautiful warm energies. I'm thankful we'll be having a musical performance from Little Spotted Horse today. I'm thankful for all of those people instrumental in helping IMHANI flourish. I'm thankful to this land that I'm on. It is Tallahassee, land of the indigenous Appalachian people in North Florida and also in Alabama and certain other areas. And I'm grateful for also the Lenni Lenape land ancestors of New York, because that is where the first IMHANI event took place, our first in-person event we had in the Bronx in New York in January of last year. I'm thankful to the ancestors and guides of Washington, D.C., which was where I was born, and of Cameroon, where my family's from, in Limbe, Bimbia land, Wobia land, all those places. So I just want to express gratitude, and I want to affirm this event, bringing healing transmissions of the understanding of Kapwa to everybody present, and that everybody leaves today feeling uplifted, feeling like they've gained some meaning and some sort of clarity around something, and most importantly, feel Kapwa, feel connected to one another. So without further ado, we can go ahead and get started. Our first speaker is Diner Nunez, Nina, and you can go ahead and introduce yourself. And Antara, that spotlight thing that you were talking about earlier, yes, thank you.
Okay, ooh, I'm on the spotlight. Hi, everybody. I hope everyone is doing well. Thank you for being here on a Sunday. I know it's early for me on a Sunday. This is like my rest day. So as Almina was saying, my name is Liner Nunez, and I am a curandera and partera. So I call myself a hood healer and a doula. And today we're gonna be kind of doing a little exercise, and I'm gonna talk about a few things. Thank you for the beautiful libations and calling in our ancestors. I just wanna take a moment for us to call in our ancestors, our honorable ancestors in this space as well. You know, just, you know, call on anyone that you want in this space at the moment. Take that time. And I don't know about y'all, but I am super exhausted today. Sunday, again, is my rest day where I'm kind of just like chilling. So today I'm like catching up. So if you are feeling tired, I think you will really enjoy the exercise that we're gonna do today. But I do wanna talk about a little bit on decolonizing therapy, right? And a lot of what Almina was saying is absolutely true, right? We tend to practice therapy in a very westernized way, and we do forget indigenous knowledge. And you know, a lot of the times when we're doing healing work, we tend to focus on these generational curses that we're trying to break, right? And we forget all of the soft things that our ancestors also left us, right? Decolonizing therapy and decolonizing any healing practice is really about remembering. It's about remembering, one, who we are, remembering that these traditions and these things live in our blood, in our body. And I know that a lot of the times we feel like, oh, but I don't know who my ancestors are. And like, where do I start? But my family doesn't practice, or this is too taboo, right? Our ancestors are always speaking to us. They're always around us. It's literally in your blood, right? So on remembering, we want to remember that the importance of touch and the importance of breath, right? These are such simple things that we don't think about, but are actually very intentional. And I think that our culture, especially in Westernized culture, we forget how important touch is, right? Like, think about the last time that you made yourself feel good, that you gave yourself a hug, or that someone gave you a good hug that just felt like, releasing, right? So I'll go ahead, since the meditation is going to be a little bit on the long side. So I hope everybody's comfy. Maybe you're on your beds, maybe you're on a chair. If you're sitting down, just make sure that your feet are planted on the ground, sit up straight, get comfy. You can turn off your camera if you like, if you feel more comfortable that way. Just do you. Okay, and if y'all hear backgrounds, it is almost summer in the Bronx. So if you hear some noise, attribute it to that. Okay. So you can close your eyes if you feel comfortable to do so. And we're gonna take 3 deep breaths in together. Okay. So take a deep breath in through your nose and let it out through your mouth. Again, take a deep breath in through your nose. Hold it for as long as you can. And exhale. And when you exhale, I want you to make as much noise as possible, okay? So again, together, deep breath in through your nose. Hold it, and let that out through your mouth. And you can do one on your own. Deep breath in through your nose. And release through your mouth. And pay attention to whatever is surrounding you. If there's noise, if there's people talking to, come to your center. Accept whatever is in your space. If you have your kids are running around, calling you. Or just focus on your breath. If you have your dog barking like mine, it's okay. I want you to take your palms and bring them together and start rubbing them. You can open your eyes. Rub them until they're very warm and you feel that heat in between your palms. Okay. And I want you to place your palms when you are ready in the space that you feel the most tension. This could be on your throat, on your head, on your forehead, on your stomach, your back, wherever you feel the most tension in your body. And I want you to place your palms, both of your hands in that area. And we can close our eyes again if you had opened them. And we're gonna do those 3 breaths together again. So again, deep breath in through your nose and let it out through your mouth. Relax your shoulders, relax your jaws. Make sure your feet are planted on the ground. Remind yourself that you are safe. Just keep breathing. And now I'm going to invite you to think about a moment in your life that we call in Indigenous culture the before and after moment. So this is a moment where you feel like something happened in your life will never be the same again. This can be good, just any moment. Allow your mind to take you there. Now think about what you see. Where are you? And for some folks, this space might be very tough, so don't forget your breath. You can rub the area that you are touching in this moment, if that helps, or tap. Now think about, how old are you in this space? Are you 10, 9? What's going on in this moment? Was it a breakup? Did you lose a family member? Or was it just something that you couldn't get done? And make sure if you're not tapping that space, you can tap that space with your fingers. You can start that now. What do you hear in this space? Who's talking? Who's there with you? If you feel like crying, it's okay. Your tears are libations. What do you smell? Can you taste anything? Are you laughing? Are you crying in this space? Now look to your left and to your right very slowly in your mind's eye. Who do you see there with you holding your hand in this moment? Is it your 10-year-old self? Is it your present self now? Maybe it's a grandmother. Maybe all you see is colors, blues, whites, and yellows. But someone is guiding you through this moment. Allow them to support you and hold your hand. Allow them to comfort you. Allow them to give you the support you needed in that moment. And don't forget we're tapping the whole way through. Now, as you finally allow them to hold your hand, they will walk us all into the most beautiful garden that you have ever seen. They're calling you, walk with them. Stand, walk towards the trees, towards the river, to the flowers. Hug this spirit guide. Tell them, I love you. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. I love you. I am sorry. Please forgive me. I love you. I am sorry. Please forgive me. Make sure you keep tapping. And as they give your hand one last warm squeeze, you can feel all of their love and energy flow through your body. From your head to your nose, down to your mouth, to your back and shoulders, to your heart center, down to your stomach, and to your root, down to your knees, and finally on the ground to your feet. Tell them thank you. I will see you later. Know that they're always there for whatever other life-changing moment, whenever you need them. You can call on them. We're gonna take 3 deep breaths together again. We're still tapping that space. So deep breath in through your nose. And let it out through your mouth. Deep breath in through your nose. And let that out through your mouth. Again, deep breath in through your nose. Take a deep, deep, deep breath. And release. If your tapping has gone faster, you can slow it down. Until you're ready to stop. Take a light stretch if you need to. Extend your arms, bring them over your head. You can now bring your palms together and rub them one last time. Again, until you feel that warmth. I'll give you all time to meet me here. And when you feel that warmth, go ahead and give yourself the biggest hug. And remember that love that you felt when your guide was walking with you. Think of someone that you know that may also need this hug and that warmth today and send that to them. Think of someone in this room, and if you don't know anyone, send the love to the collective in this space. You can release your arms. And slowly, very slowly, wiggle your fingers, your toes, and slowly open your eyes when you're ready. And if your eyes are open, you're still breathing, it's okay. Y'all just give me a thumbs up or something on the chat so I know that y'all here. Thank you. Thank you. Awesome. All right, so good. Does anyone want to talk about how they're feeling or where their hands took them and what space, what colors maybe they saw? And it's okay if you don't want to. I see a wow, thank you from Angie. Or just how was that experience? Did we fall asleep? Thank you. I see this made me release a lot of tension. Yes, I feel peaceful. Yes. Did anyone meet their guides? Maybe that's a no. Someone said, I heard, no, sorry, Ileana said, I heard drumming, felt called into the circle. Yes, good. How was the tapping? Did we do the tapping? It felt good. Queen Lynn is saying the tapping was important in grounding my thoughts and connecting with places where I was holding the tension, I'm assuming, in the body. Yes. So this is an exercise and it doesn't have to be this long. It could be super short and you can, like, you don't need anyone to guide you through this. You can kind of just do that on your own. Yes, tension, also trauma, stress, memories. Antara said, my guys look like, oh guys, I can't read this. So if y'all can come off the thing. Like, you guys just go ahead and tell me.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah, so my guides look like humanoid, like trees and like leaves, and then also like at certain like key moments when I was feeling like a lot of feelings, like a strong gust of wind would like hit me because I'm outside, and then like at some point flower petals just started like falling on me. Yeah, but it was really helped me release a lot of tension too, and like helped me like revisit certain things that were stressing me out that I was bringing into the present in my present like relationships, and like made me like realize them. So yeah.
Wow, thank you. That's beautiful. Yes, when leaves are falling on you, that's always an indicator. They're always with us. Our elements and plants are also ancestors. That's beautiful. Wow. Angie, do you want to share your experience?
Yeah, first of all, thank you for that. That was really beautiful. I definitely cried. Yeah, so once you were like, it's okay to cry, it's a libation, I was like, okay, period, this is happening. But my back has been feeling really tight, and I did the tapping on my back and it helped. And when I called in my guide, I had a dream like a couple of months ago of my grandmother leading me up my block and like turning one way, and like I met her again walking up like in the middle of the street, like walking up to her and just holding her hand. It felt very beautiful. And then simultaneously like seeing myself as a young person. And then like the person that I think also which was helping me through those transitions, I think is who I currently am right now. And I think that's when I realized that, I started to cry. But it felt very beautiful, and kind of like a reset. So thank you.
It's like a virtual Olympia, a virtual cleansing. Good.
Yes.
I'm glad to hear. That's like, right, when we're crying, we're transmuting that energy, right? We're changing that to bring, yeah, Eliana, please go ahead.
Hello.
Hi.
For me, I've been really cultivating a relationship with my ancestors for a while now. Right now, I'm based in Puerto Rico, even though I'm from the Bronx at the moment. So I'm definitely feeling a lot of their energy. There's one particular ancestor that came up for me not too long ago. And he came up to me while I was in person. I could see him visually with my eyes. And my entire, like the bottom of my spine just like lit up with like vibrations, and my entire body just went from like real hot. And so I was able to see him again in this moment. And I've seen him before in dreams twice as well, even before that. And he led me into a circle where there was a lot of drumming, a lot of tribal drumming. There was a lot of reds, earth tones. Basically, I did a lot of focusing on the sacral chakra. I even felt that after a while, my tapping became very rhythmic, or almost like I'm beating on my stomach like it's a drum almost.
Absolutely. Wow.
And I could feel a lot of sexual trauma that I was looking to get rid of, and I was able to vocally like reclaim my energy back from those experiences and give that energy back to those individuals as well. So yeah, thank you.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that. Yes, and a lot of those before and after moments, those then right, this is called like mapping, or what I call mapping your generational curses, right? So a lot of those moments are really heavy, right? A lot of it sometimes is sexual trauma, or just people passing away. It's just very heavy moments. So thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate it. And I'm glad that you were able to transmute some of that energy. Yeah. I don't know if there was anyone else. Does anyone have any questions? Are we super relaxed and like ready to go to sleep?
I don't have a question, but I just wanted to share this values of meditation and talking guidance and meditation forms that we see in different indigenous practices can be very healing and can be very centering, which is just another testament to why we can tap into these practices for mental health, and they can really ease stress. I wasn't exactly overstressed today, but I guess there was parts of my body that was feeling a bit stressed that I didn't realize until we went through this. And I'm like, oh wow, this feels so peaceful. This feels so centered. And sometimes I do meditation and guided meditations like this, but sometimes I do it by listening to music. There's a lot of different ways to do it. And sometimes he'd even do walking meditation or fire brush, jumping up and down. And you putting in the tapping, I think was particularly interesting. And it shows that meditation can be done a lot of different ways. We're kind of conditioned to think it's like sitting still, crisscross applesauce like a Buddha, right? And that doesn't always work for everybody. And so the tapping and that movement of the tapping, I feel like is a way to help people who may have, problems sitting completely still and like not doing anything. I've also noticed correlations with working with people and talking to people who have autism, who have, they like to tap a lot, and finding out that tapping energy, that helps them, and it can help anybody, but it can help people with autism to move around spiritual energy in their bodies. And energy is a form of communication, and so things don't always come out through words. Sometimes it comes up vibrationally in a movement, and it sets the energy of a tone of a space, or shifts you to think about a certain topic and what have you. And when we're talking about indigenous methods of healing, when we're talking about decolonizing therapeutic practices, it's important to make openness for the various ways it shows up. And I think tapping is a great way to do that.
Absolutely. But that was my little piece, and you can take that with you everywhere. And just a little tapping goes a really, really long way. So don't forget that you have that warmth. That's your energy in your hands and your power. So I'm not sure if we're doing questions or
You still have a few more minutes if you want to, that people can ask you questions, maybe just about you and your work in general. We did start a little bit late. We started about 5 minutes late, and then some other stuff came up. So you have until the 125 if you want. So anybody can ask you any question about anything, or you can share more about your journey or your practice, anything like that.
Okay, so yeah, Kirsten, go ahead.
Hi, thank you so much for the meditation. I'm newly trying to get into having or trying to build a relationship with guides and that connection. And I noticed like there was a resistance to do that, or at least myself thinking that, oh, I'm just making stuff up. And like, you know, that intuition and things like that, that's where I'm just flowing with right now in my life and trusting if there is a connection or not. And I just want to know about like your journey, or how do you, what you do to like try to connect more. And yeah.
Okay, thank you. So I think that's one of, like, as a healer, that's one or a curandera, that's one of the hardest things, is to like, especially when you're starting to distinguish between like, what's my ancestor, or am I just making all these things up? Like, did I really see that turtle or that owl in my mind that came out of nowhere? Like, what's going on? And I think that that process looks so different for everybody. And it's and I think that it's also learning to distinguish like anxiety and your instinct, right? And I've had to practice that, where I remind myself that my anxiety is when I'm like, wait, did that happen? I don't know. And I'm questioning myself all the time, as opposed to when it's my instinct that I'm like, yes, I did see that turtle. Yes, that was my spirit that moved that, you know, kind of coming to that, to balancing those two, and recognizing those two areas, right? So that has helped me a lot in deciding when things are from my spirits. But as I've grown in my practice, so I've been doing this since I was 10 years old. And I am initiated in La 21 Divisiones in Dominican Republic. And so, you know, I've been practicing and experiencing spirits for a really long time. Yeah, and I think like, and folks, especially because when I came, I was born in Dominican Republic, and then I was raised here in the Bronx. And you know, I know that a lot of people are like, okay, I don't have my ancestors with me, I can't connect to my ancestors here, like where do I start? Like, can I just start building an altar? And really everything that came to me truly was instinctual. It was like one day I was just putting water in a space, and then I started using the elements like, right, water, fire, and then I put like things in the four corners. Like, it really just like came instinctually. It's just, you have to trust yourself, trust that whatever keeps being repeated in your head is maybe what you need to do, right? Like, as long as it's not self-destructive, right? Like if you keep thinking about, let's say, owls or a turtle, or like you keep seeing, like maybe, like for me right now, I'm being called to move, and my anxiety is like, should I? Like, I don't know. And every time that I see like a turtle, that's my spirits being like, yes, like, no, bitch, we told you you need to move like 3 months ago. Like, what are you doing? You know, and the best thing is when you actually listen, because a lot of the times we're looking for signs how we want to see them, and sometimes that's not how spirit communicates with us, right? Like spirit, like I know some folks feel like ringing in their ear. Some folks can see them. Some folks can even get different smells, right? So if you wake up one day and you're smelling like tobacco or incense or palo santo, and you know that's not lit anywhere in the room, you know, don't be so hard on yourself. Just see that with your third eye and your heart. Be like, okay, that's there, and let's keep it moving, you know? And slowly, as they see, the more that you connect with them, the more they will bring you and show you these signs, and the more clearer you will feel. I hope that answered your question. I feel like I went up in tangents, but I hope that answered your question. Yes, thank you. Is there anything else the folks want to ask or may want to know about connecting with their ancestors?
I kind of had some questions. This is Ileana again.
Hi.
Hi. So I started my journey into spirituality and got introduced to Lucami or Santeria by a friend of mine, and from there I just kind of instinctually, kind of like you mentioned, um, really got immersed with the word, really got into following that a lot more, especially because I started the journey seeking healing from dealing with like years of like anxiety and like clinical depression.
Mhm.
Um, that I found out later on is more generational than anything else. And so when it comes to getting more connected with your ancestors, I see a lot of ancestors or guides, gods, goddesses, deities, a lot of animal spirits as well in my dreams very often. Like this morning I had a manta ray show up in my dreams, and it was very much in the depth of the ocean and just came out from the shadows.
Mm.
And so oh, that's weird. And so when it comes to ancestors, what would be a good next step in terms of being able to honor them more? I'm still very, I'd say, young in the religion. I'm still looking for the right teachers to show up, and I've asked for teachers, and teachers have shown up.
Mm.
But I'm wondering if I wanted to facilitate a stronger connection with my ancestors, um, what practices would you recommend, or what have you tried that's really been something that was helpful for you?
So I do I also read like I divine with tarot and shells. So I think that for me, and right now a lot of healers come into their magic and their power from healing themselves, right? Because we're so disconnected from our roots, so disconnected from our indigenous knowledge, that we don't have our elders to tell us, like, you know, like maybe this is why we're having so much doubt around our magic. This is why we're having so much doubt around, like, you know, you're like, oh my God, am I going crazy? Like, am I really seeing these things? You know, this is why we're having this fear, right? Because let's say if we were back home, and maybe even if it was taboo, because it's still taboo in Dominican Republic, right? But your
Yeah.
ancestors and your elders would still be like, no, that's normal. They'll be like, she has the don, you know, or she has that thing. But you won't be questioning yourself, because you know that it exists and it is normal, right?
Yeah.
So I think that normalizing that experience in your daily life will help you connect to your spirits more, right? Like allowing yourself to accept, like, this is who I am, this is what I see, this is what I do, and this is what I love to do, will allow you to grow that connection, right? Because when your spirits see that you're accepting them more, they will come around you. It's like any relationship that you're building, right? Like you have to talk to them first. Because some people are like, I'm gonna light a candle, I'm gonna build an altar. The spirit don't even know who the hell you are, right? Right? So, you know, that's why throughout the meditation, I talk a lot about colors, right? Because the way that I work is through colors, right? And a lot of our spirits, especially in Mikumi, Santeria, they work with colors, right? Because colors is like a way that spirit communicates, right? Because spirit doesn't always talk like how we talk. It's like
Yeah.
through song, through a book, through colors again. So just pay attention to those little signs, and like whatever color you always feel around you, kind of look up like what spirit is connected to this color, and you'll start, like, if they are your spirit, they will reach out to you. You know, just let them know, like, hey guys, I'm open. You know, because I know a lot of us think about our protection, like, I want to be protected, but I still want to get to know you. Some of us are terrified of seeing them, so you're like, you know, just come into my dreams, please. Like, I don't want to see you in person. You know, so just baby steps to build that connection. But the more you allow yourself to be you, the more they're willing to come to you. Yes.
Yeah, that's one thing I kind of struggled with in the beginning, where I was receiving just a lot from them. After a while, it was like boom, day after day, dream, colors, numbers, sequences, and I'm like, all right, y'all talking.
Pay attention to that, right? Because there's something that they're trying to get across to you.
And so, in terms of like the family, they see my progress with this, and they're like, what are you doing? I'm like, you know, just lighting candles, minding my business. They're like, don't do that. I'm like, Nah, I think I'm gonna do that.
And that's one of the biggest questions that I get is like, how can I build my altar if I'm still living with my family and my family doesn't practice this? Like, how can I do this in these spaces? And I think that it's just kind of that it's like anything that you want to do in your life. Sometimes we have to learn to mother ourselves or parent ourselves and be like, if this is important to me, I have to do it for me. Right? Like, and it doesn't have to be this big thing. It could just be that one candle, one incense, just a little cup of water in your room. It doesn't have to be crazy, because we like doing big without knowing things. But yes, it doesn't have to be like this extravagant, crazy like altar. Just recognizing them, and spirits know your intention. Your guides, your ancestors, they read your intention. So do that with a clear heart, and they'll be there.
All right, thank you.
Thank you for your question. Any more questions?
I just wanted to share that I was laughing a little bit when you were talking about the fear, being scared of the spirits, right? And that's something that I always had when I was little. I'd always be scared. I slept in the dark I slept in the light on, until I was 17 years old, right? That's something that you grow out of when you're a child. I was over here grown like 17, still 16, sleeping with the light on. My sister is in the chat, she could attest to this. And it's like, I was always scared of like ghosts of spirits and like all this and all that. And now I'm a medium, right? So like, just doing the baby steps slowly over time, you never know what it will evolve into. I never planned on becoming a medium. That was not something I set out to do. That's not what I was looking for, but it came up. And whatever is coming up for you, you never know what it's going to lead to. So I've noticed different people in the chat were talking about the different animals that they've seen. Some said turtles, some said different things. Really pay attention to that. Really pay attention to these energies, because that's the spiritual foundation, and the spiritual foundation leads into the physical. This is why, from an indigenous spiritual perspective, when you are looking at what the Western says diagnosis is, or seeing what is wrong with the person, you have to, the first thing that we look at is, are they aligned with the energies that they need? Are they in clear communication with the energies that they need to be a good person? Whether that's a space to exercise their talents, whether that's a space to explore themes being brought up in their life, because these are the beginnings of what we can call energetic imbalances that, if we ignore them over time, can lead to us going on paths that don't feed us or that aren't helping us be who we are. And sometimes when we get, it seems like an overwhelm of stuff, where like lots of symbols like this last participant was sharing, it may reflect like a build-up where there was a long period of time where the spiritual energy wasn't accessed or was overlooked or wasn't being able to get to, not just in your personal life, in yourself, but in your family. So maybe your family members or ancestors for some period of time over history weren't able to really fully access the stuff, and now you've created a space for openness, so now it's all kind of popping up all over the place. But if you do those baby steps and you make those spaces to just be patient and compassionate with yourself and make things simple, I think you'll be okay.
Absolutely, I agree. My sister Alina is also the same. So, and usually when you have some like mediumship, right, it runs in your family, right? So my sister was the same way with the lights. Like, I had to walk her to the bathroom every night. But it's crazy because I can hear spirits, and I'm aware of their entity, but she can see them. So we kind of work together in that way. But I absolutely, like, I'm always like, why are you so scared of the dark? So I know, but and even when I started as a child, I was terrified, right? But I was lucky enough to have folks, and that I still live back home, to be like, no, that's normal. You can talk to them, like, you're meant to do this. And just like you, I mean, I had no idea that this is what I would be doing. Like, this is not a decision that you make. They kind of just like, no, you And sometimes you really don't want to, and because it's hard, it's a lot of work, it's heavy, you are feeling folks' energies, you're allowing that to pass through your body and releasing it, right? You're also teaching folks how to transmute that on their own, right? So first you have to unlearn and decolonize and do all that work yourself to be able to like practice with others to do that for themselves too. And just so many things that you said there, right? Like I thought, I was like, yeah, I'm gonna be a therapist, woo, and that it could not have been the furthest thing. But this is our therapy. This is our knowledge that has existed forever, right? Like this is not holistic and new and we're discovering, like, no, this knowledge always existed, right? We just like using new terms, like, right, PTSD, we've already, we call that soul loss, right? And indigenous knowledge. We just like creating these new terms, and I feel like we're going in circles and circles, just figuring out these new ways to heal folks when the answers were always there, right? It's like calling back our souls, right? That's why in our practices, we do limpias or things like that. Let's see, right? And this is what when I had mentioned through the meditation, when I'm talking about learning what time your soul is living in, right? So PTSD is your soul living in that moment of trauma. And this is what we call soul loss. So like any time that you feel these moments of disassociation, you feel like, oh, maybe I'm not present in my body right now, that is our soul traveling, right? Because it's too hard to live in our space. It's too hard to live in our bodies in that moment, right? So make sure that you don't necessarily need a professional to walk you through that. Yes, it's good to have that guidance, right? Because you do want to be around folks that have a long time and are building those connections with spirits consistently. But you can also call your soul back, right? Say like, I'm Nunez, and like I'm here, I'm present, I'm okay. I'm not looking at the chat, but let me scroll down. Yes, but yes, absolutely. All those, like Amina was saying, first, it starts as a spiritual wound. Like all your wounds that you feel physically, that's why I say maybe you feel tension in your back. That means that you're not being supported. Maybe you don't feel supported in your life, right? Because our backs support us. That's what they do, right? So pay attention to where you feel that pain too. Is it in your heart space, right? Maybe the pain is more emotional. Is it your throat chakra, right? Maybe you where you were tapping was on your throat. Maybe that manifests in that way. And I tell this story all the time, and I promise I will not pass 125. I tell this story all the time where I was having a really hard moment. And for 2 months, I kept getting like penicillin shot after penicillin shot because the doctors were like, oh, you have strep. And this is like an extreme case of strep. And like my throat clogged up. I couldn't eat. I could barely drink water. And I just was not okay. And it wasn't until years later that I had connected, like, okay, what was happening in my life at that time, right? And I was having a really tough time with school. I was not feeling like I could defend myself. I didn't feel like I could be my authentic self. I didn't feel like I could talk. I just felt very held back, like I had no voice. So that emotion manifested physically, right? So I couldn't talk anymore. I literally couldn't talk. I couldn't eat. Like I was truly voiceless. And it wasn't until I went back home and I was like, okay, I can't do this. And then that I allowed myself to be my true self, that it cleared up. It didn't matter. I took all the shots in the world that did everything under the sun. They were like, oh, it's not strep. Every time they did the test, it was negative. So no one had any idea what was going on with me. And you'll hear so many stories like this. But the problem is that we're ignoring the spiritual manifestations of those wounds. So make sure, like, if you go to the doctor and you're like, oh, I don't know what's going on, we need both, right? We could use both medicines, but know that it always starts spiritually and energetically. But yeah, I'll leave it at that because I can talk forever. I'll give you some time to process. I can keep going.
Thank you so much. You've shared so much, and your energy, your voice, it's so calming, it's so centering and like peace bringing. It's you're on your right path. You're in the right place. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, and thank y'all for listening.
Thank you so much again. I'm gonna spotlight Veronica. Veronica, are you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready. I'm sorry, I was in lurk mode, just being like, yes, like,
Okay.
okay, cool. Hi, everyone. My name is Veronica Agard. I use the she, her series of pronouns. I do a lot of things, and I'm a lot of things to a lot of people. However, I'm daughter of Southern Black folks, and Caribbean folks via a lot of different places, because I realized my ancestors moved around quite a bit. And I'm grateful that they had that freedom of motion. I am showing up today to offer one of my creative babies, if you will, called Ancestors in Training. The version of this that I'm going to do in reflection of the theme for today is called Intergenerational Compassion, and I actually think it goes really well. I don't know if of course everything is as it should be, but it goes like super, super well with like what Lena was sharing earlier just now around families and like how do we hold space for ourselves while doing this work and also deepening our relationship with our ancestors. And yeah, so I have slides, which I like to preface what I'm about to say with, if you don't have some place to capture your thoughts or to write like physically with a notebook, or like if you prefer just using the notes function in your phone, like however you want to write it down, I suggest that you write stuff down as it comes up for you, because there's a lot of information in the slides, and also you'll get access to the slides as soon as I'm done with it. I'll drop it in the chat so that way you can go back to it, ease into it, do what you need to do, because I like also front loading that there's a lot of questions and a lot of things that I will put forth, and anything that I ask you all to explore. It's something that I've explored myself and am in progress of, but also there's no rush to the answer, right? So if something really profound happens for you and you're like, whoa, I need to sit with that, like that's why I like sharing the slides afterwards, because folks will be like, I want to explore that, but not right now. So again, that's why everything is linked and public. So can I be enabled to share my screen, please, to protect people?
Yeah, 1 second.
Mm-hmm.
Stop me. I'm trying to figure out if I can do it without making you the host. If anything, I'll make you the host and then just switch.
Okay, cool.
Okay. All right, I'll make you the host. You're the host. Okay. Now you can.
Okay, cool. All right, we are going to share this screen, sharing sound, optimize your video clip. I have to say that to myself because every time I present, I forget that that's the ways in which you have to do it. Otherwise, it looks a little weird, especially for the recording. So here we go. Not that slide, that's the end. Also, I'm gonna turn off my camera because I'm always awkward when I do this. But my name, again, is Veronica Agard. I use the she, her pronouns. I apologize for the sounds of bedside in the background. I live off of the JZ line, so you will hear it periodically. But again, this is Ancestors in Training, Intergenerational Compassion. So like I said before, there's a rhythm to this that invites folks to make sure that they have a place and a space to write down their thoughts in case anything comes up. but I'm going to introduce the background and the concept in general. And I use different types of media, so you'll see in a bit what I mean by that. I'll share the intentions of what I mean by understanding how to be an ancestor in training through a lens of compassion across generations. And then we'll spend more time here in application and discussion. And then you get the links to all the things, and I will close for any thoughts or questions that folks may have of me. So, and I like using this video because ancestors in training as a concept has changed and grown so much that sometimes when folks ask me what it is, I'm like, I can tell you what it was. I'm not quite sure what it is. And like I play around with definitions, and I believe that these kind of things are fluid and changing in real time, just like we are. And how to be responsive to the work, especially when dealing with a concept such as ancestors in training that is rooted in so many indigenous technologies. It's important to make sure that it is grow and change as we do. So this is what I said it was in 2018. Oop.
Phrase ancestors in training, it comes from the book by Yeye Luisha Test, who wrote Jambalaya. She has a quote, not from that book, but she has a quote that says, "We are the ancestors of the future, and what we do now will have an impact." And when I read that, I was like, oh, like that's a workshop in and of itself. That is a thing. When I say ancestors in training, that also includes the indigenous teachings of doing work for the next 7 generations. So the next 7 generation medicine is to walk and do this work for that 7th generation in your lineage that you know you will not see, and to do the work to walk a particular way and to talk a particular way, or to set things in motion so that way that descendant won't have to potentially struggle as much. So it's very much rooted in conjure work that is being named in Jambalaya, the book, and also from the Ifa and Yoruba traditions, but then also from the indigenous teachings, because understanding that we are on Lenape land, like that has to be an active part of this work that we do around ancestors, because we walk on land that was taken away. So all of that swirled around to get to this point of how do we lean into the fact that we won't be here forever, that our time here is finite. And if we understand that our time here is finite from a place that isn't rooted in fear, or isn't this kind of bodily reaction, but actually more open, so as opposed to a closed fist that says, I have to grab all of these things, and I have to grab up all these resources, and I have to be the one to have it, to have more of an open palm and say, okay, here it is. Here's what I have to give. Here's what I have to offer.
I got cut off based off of the timing of this video, but basically what I said is, this is what I have to give. This is what I have to offer. So the intentions or the big questions for intergenerational compassion as a lens are, not all ancestors lived honorable lives. We see this in intergenerational traumas, but what does it mean to reconcile this truth with our unlearning and or our learning processes? Another way to think through some of these intentions, I keep going that way. Another way to think through some of these intentions is to, hold on one second. Another way to think through some of these intentions is to look at, like I said earlier, popular media and think about how we've seen this show up. So sometimes, especially on Instagram, that ends up with things that are said on Twitter that end up going viral on Instagram, which I'm not sure why that's a part of social media culture, but it is what it is. A person named Chris Smith, aka Rantings of a Girl on Twitter, said, "You talk about healing like it's some mystical thing with scented candles, but healing is a dirty business, like digging up dead bodies, and they're not even all of your bodies." I think about this a lot when it comes to obviously ancestral work. When we talk about intergenerational trauma and connection, and especially going into the body, like what Linnea just had us explore, like there's so many things that come up within us that are not ours to deal with, right? Or not necessarily, it's not that they aren't ours to deal with, it's something that we didn't do, that we didn't, decide that, oh, I'm gonna have XYZ pain in my body because I want to be able to no, that's not how it works, right? Like sometimes we are able to sometimes we're able to do the healing work when we realize that some of the responsibilities or some of the seeds of the work that needs to be done isn't necessarily something that started with us, but it can end with us, right? I believe in cycle breakers as a concept as well around intergenerational healing, right? Or the logic of this this may have started before me, but this ends with me, right? And especially something that I'm thinking about right now in these times when we're talking about the current pandemics and like something like this around, like, what does it mean to even do ancestral work? Or as folks are saying in the previous session, like, how do you step into this work without potentially upsetting relatives or like triggering them? And then it's also like, okay, what does it mean to do a big offering for your ancestor? Like, what does it mean to go to a ceremony in a pandemic? Like, does that even happen anymore? Like, there's so many things that have shifted because of the current pandemic that we're in, and it's not the first pandemic that our people have lived through, right? Like, folks have lived through the Spanish flu, and I say this knowing that there's so many pandemics and there's so many catastrophes that are happening in the world if you know where to look, right? Thinking of Palestine as I say that, thinking about Puerto Rico, thinking about Hawaii, thinking about ongoing ways in which colonization is still a pandemic amongst indigenous people, right? And indigenous to the Americas, especially with what's happening in Colombia. So when because we have access to the knowledge of everything that's going wrong in the world, we can end up becoming one of these three things. We can be burnt out, we can have compassion fatigue, or we can have something called vicarious trauma, right? Like there's so many ways in which we respond to what's happening in the world through one of these lenses, right? Like some of it is just like, for example, with the ways in which the police are harming protesters in Colombia, that can be a trigger for those of us that have done organizing around anti-police brutality here in the States. So if we're burnt out from that period of organizing, we can just withdraw, we can be negative, and it just becomes a trigger. Or we can have a whole wave of grief and sadness if we're in a space of being fatigued. Or we can actually go on the other side and be like anxious and sad and be apathetic. And especially around the ways in which that shows up in the body. Folks, when they get stressed out, it also shows up in the things that they ingest, right? So it could be that they eat more, they eat less, they drink, like whatever the vice is, right? Like folks consume or don't consume things as a means to cope, right? And I'm not casting judgment on any of those coping mechanisms at all. I'm just naming that as a way that we express one of these three categories in response to the ways in which the world is hurting, right? So, especially in terms of the antithesis of this, right? Like if we're talking about trauma and compassion fatigue and all of these things, the antidote has to be care, right? Like whether it is self-care, community care, or a mix of both. I really believe in self-care in a way that is not just talking about what we can do within our bodies and all this other kind of stuff. Self-care is also making sure that we, speaking of consume, that if we're consuming media and we're consuming information, we are consuming information that has been vetted, right? Like we're not participating in misinformation. Or, for example, another viral quote that I think about is by Nikita Valero. She said, the way that we fail people is by shouting self-care at folks that really need community care, right? So community care can look like making sure that somebody has a ride to get their vaccine if they choose to get the vaccine. It can look like making sure that somebody has an anchor, which in political organizing terms, an anchor is somebody that basically knows that you're going to a protest and has all the necessary contact information should you get arrested or anything like that. Community care can also look like paying for somebody to get a massage because they've been sitting at home and they've been working from home and they you know, their neck is tired of looking at a screen all the time, sitting up on all the work related Zoom calls, right? So those are the ways in which community care can show up. But I would like to hear from y'all, and I'm gonna pop out of screen sharing for a second, but I would like us to discuss, because again, as much as I'm sharing information, I want this to be an active conversation, and I don't like this idea of a presentation being static, meaning that I'm just talking at folks. I like being in conversation with folks. So with everything that I've shared so far, I'd like to hear from folks what care looks like in their culture. So I'm gonna escape out of the slide. And folks can either respond in the chat, come onto the screen, however they want to share. But I'm going to stop sharing for a second so that way I can see folks. Yeah. So the question again is, what does care look like in your culture? And this isn't school, so I'm not going to call on folks either. I don't. Like sometimes people make me a teacher and I'm like, yo, I'm not a teacher.
Something that's important in my cultures, in African cultures, in West Central African cultures, is food. That's something that is very seen as care. You know, like if when you first come into somebody's house, first thing they maybe is, do you want something to eat? Or if somebody's going through, you know, a rough time, maybe they're going through a big move, or maybe they are going through finals, whatever this thing is, I'm going to drop off some food, you know, or they just at a store and they know you like this thing. It's just like, oh, I'm going to be passing through their side of town today because of an event I had. Let me just get this food for them. So food is a big thing in my culture.
Absolutely, especially when it's a food that's like, if somebody is passing through a cultural enclave. So for example, a friend of mine, Sheena, she lives uptown in the Bronx, right? And there is a big Caribbean diaspora that's up there, right? Around like Gun Hill Road and White Plains Road. So she went on a White Plains Road field trip just because. And she goes, oh, they have cocoa bread. I'm gonna get you some. And I was just like, give me all the cocoa bread, please. Give it to. It's like, so those kind of like very, and I only know how to describe this in Spanish, so forgive me. Como cariño, like very loving, very like, I thought of you. Like you didn't have to ask for this, right? But I inhaled all of that bread because it's so good. But And Linaire said food as well. Kirsten said the first thing that comes to mind is food in terms of care, asking if they ate, if they want a plate, right? And it goes with what Amina said too, right? Like thinking about how to nourish each other, right? Especially not just care in a way that we, you know, self-care, like we nourish each other. I'm nourished. If you water me, I water you, but also like literally, like, did you drink water? Does anybody else want to share what care looks like in their culture?
I'd say like on both my parents' side, like my dad, he's from Dominican Republic. My mom grew up in the Bronx. I would say clothes, because like I'm realizing now my mom and also my dad's family, they always are buying me clothes and like, or like simple things like socks, because like growing up, like they didn't have obviously like a lot of like nice clothes or even just simple things that they need. And like it created like a lot of shame and like what's called, I guess, poverty trauma. And like I'm seeing like how it's like that's why they buy me just clothes, just like, yeah, that's how they show love. And yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely feel that around, because a lot of that has to do with class, right? Like we're talking about whether folks can afford to buy new things and how often, and like, you know, like spending money on things that are not necessarily quote essential, right? I think that that's something that's a, what's another word that we heard all the time last year? Unprecedented and essential are like two words that I'm like, depending on the context of which this is used, I'm like, I try to avoid it. But when we talk about clothing, we even can talk about how we adorn ourselves, right, as a form of care, right? Like what we choose to wear, like what we choose not to wear, like for example, or things that we've inherited, right? Or what's another word for this? Heirlooms. Like I'm a writer, so I'm clearly like, I'd like to pinpoint words and make sure that I have a fuller or enriched vocabulary when I speak on certain things. So when we talk about heirlooms and things like that, I'm like I wear this all the time. Like this is my grandmother who passed away, her ring, right? And I don't have a lot of things from her. Unfortunately, she loves, you want to talk about fashion, she loved jewelry. Like she was, she immigrated here in 1968 with like a middle school equivalent education, and made it work, raised my dad and my uncle, so that way they were better off than her, which is always the ideal, especially for immigrants. And also just parenting in general, from what I understand, like the hope is that your child would do better than you did. But I say all this to say, some of my favorite pieces, because, sorry, I'm laughing at myself. I'm a Libra rising, so I'm very much into the aesthetics, and I like jewelry, I like shiny things, right? But I feel naked if I go outside or if I do something important without this ring. Because especially because I'm a namesake, like my first name is Veronica, my grandmother's middle name was Veronica, that's where it comes from. So I'm like, okay, we talk about our ancestors being present, and I'm like, one of the easy ways to do it is if, and it goes with what Linaire was saying actually in response to the question of like, how can we build an altar if we're not in a space where we can physically build it? We're an altar too, right? So how we choose to adorn ourselves and what we choose to consume, and like, do we wrap our hair? Do we not? Do we wear light colors only, or do we avoid the color black like the plague? Like all of those questions can actually be boiled down to like, can we wear our altar? Can we wear things? Can we adorn ourselves in a way that is sacred? Queen Lynn said, showing up, and sometimes we think we need to have the answers to everything, when really just being present can be more supportive for folks. My culture definitely moves in the showing up and being physically or intentionally spiritually present. Oh, there's mad Libra risings here. I'm here for this. Libra also represents harmony and balance in relationships. Yeah, and I think especially around what Queen Lynn said too, about how can we, like if the task of, or edit, if how we can show care for somebody isn't being present, then that also means we have to be present to ourselves too, right? Like, because it doesn't matter, edit. We do ourselves a disservice when we try to be present to other people without being present to our needs first, right? Especially given the times and there's so many things happening. Something that I do as a form of care, I'll say, like, to my friends, if they're in the midst of like sharing something, I'll say, like, I don't have capacity for this at the moment, but when I can reply to you in a full reply, I will give you a full reply. Or sometimes a shortened version of that can be like, acknowledging that I saw this and I will come back to you as soon as I can, right? Because I might be moving around. I might just be like I might be doing something like playing The Sims, speaking of care, because sometimes when I'm anxious about the world and the things that I can or can't control, I'll just play a video game because I can control all the things that happen in there. So I have to go, but thank you. Sorry, I just read what Kirsten said. But yeah, cool. So unless anybody has a question or a thought around what care looks like in their culture, I'm going to jump back into the slides because we've got a little bit more to go.
I just wanted to add cleaning, like support in cleaning spaces as a form of like care. Something I've seen is like my grandmother will come over to like our house and just like spiritually clean it, put like holy water in different places and do her prayers, or like actually physically help out and clean as a form of like service and community care.
Yeah, thank you, Angie. That's another one too, not just like both and. So like both the physical home and also the spirituality of that, right? Around like washing things away or like cleansing a space of its energy depending on where it is. And this is something that I think about now a lot as like, quote, outside returns. I'm like, all right, when I step outside and I'm going to be in company again, do I have Florida water? Do I have Palo Santo? Do I need any of that? Do I trust the space enough to not have to like immediately cleanse it like every 30 seconds? Like that's what my brain will literally just be like, do I need this today? Like, or can I just chill? And like, I'll just wait to like a reply or like some kind of hand tingle of like, nah, put that in the bag, or nope, just bring some eucalyptus oil and you'll be fine, right? Like, but having the tools and having folks in our lives that can give us those kind of things in return, right? Like to make sure that the space is safe, or to make sure that our homes are safe, or like not just sweeping in the sense of it being a passive thing, but like adding a little ritual to it, because everything is ritual, everything is ceremony, and just being like, okay, let me wash out all this energy around whatever it is that you need to, and let me make space for this, right? Because I'm very much team manifest, but also if you're going to manifest all the things, whatever they are, you need to actively be giving up some things so that way those blessings actually have a space to land. Because I really do believe in, you can manifest all you want, but if you don't give up some things, it's gonna bounce and go to somebody else because you didn't make space. Okay, cool. Yeah, so let me go back into screen share. Boop, 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 boop. Share the screen, please. Not that one, but this one. Boom. Okay. So we just talked about what care looks like in our culture, but I also want to continue to speak about how we can, because care can show up in a lot of different ways. And again, like I said before, care, the need for care implies that there's something, that there was a predecessor, that there was something that, you know, for most days, that it implies that something not necessarily went wrong, but something, you know, something needs to be changed. So if there was something that needs to be alchemized or like removed or anything like that, right? And one of the things that I do as a tool in terms of self-regulating is that I identify how I'm actually feeling, not just from a place of being quote angry or scared or power, whatever the emotion is, right? Like thinking about it from a way to, thinking about it as a way to do deeper reflection or deeper transformation, to actually be like, okay, like I may feel like at first glance, I may feel angry, but in actuality, I feel frustrated because of XYZ, right? And I'm big on like, I can end up, personally, I can end up feeling very frustrated, or like sometimes when I'm upset or I'm crying, I'll actually end up being, like if I'm upset and I think I'm angry, I'm actually frustrated, and it's because of something else, right? And the ways in which our emotions show up in us, and understanding how that plays out, especially somatically, when, or like how it shows up in the body. I know for me, it's been really helpful in terms of my ancestral practice, because then I think back to things that I witnessed in my parents and in my extended family as a kid, that I'm like, oh, wait a minute, like so-and-so wasn't mad, like they could have been A, B, and C feeling, right? Or that person didn't necessarily know how to express themselves in a full range of emotions because ABC, right? Like especially for our family members and our now ancestors, that they couldn't necessarily practice care in this very just get a candle and just do yoga and it'll be fine, like quote, like I'm being sarcastic, right? Like there's a way in which self-care has been commodified that it's just like this rose gold colorway, and folks are just like, yeah, just get a candle and just do this, and I'm like, yeah, it'll be fine, but like you can do yoga, and but don't talk about what's happening in India and like with COVID. Like there's a way that kind of brand of self-care irritates me clearly. So when I say self-care, I mean all of the ways in which we talked about care showing up in our culture. Unfortunately, some of our ancestors weren't afforded that level of care, especially because they were often giving that care to other people. So by the time they got home, they couldn't extend themselves further. Like I know for me personally, when I was working with high school seniors who were applying to college, if it was a day where I had to walk them through how to apply for FAFSA, and somebody came in my phone, didn't matter who it was. If somebody came in my phone, a friend of mine, parent, family member who really wanted my advice on something or wanted to chitter chatter, I had to say, like, look, I spent all day speaking. My throat hurts. Like, I'm not at full capacity. Is it really urgent? Or can I rest and can I get back to you on this, right? Like, that's how to, like, for me, that's a form of self-care, because I realize that there's a lot of power in my words and what I speak. So I'm like, if I'm depleted, I have to set that boundary of care for myself to be like, it does not have to be me right now. If it is not that urgent, I will get back to this. I will send a note. I will do something. But I think that now, especially as we talk about care and community, and we do all this kind of work, we have to continue to make sure that we're in touch with the full range of our emotions, and also showing compassion to the folks that we come from, who through all of the isms, white supremacy, racism, and all these other kind of things, and they did not have the means to spend this time with themselves, right? Like there is a real privilege in being able to understand your emotions, and being, as much as people are like, oh, just go to therapy, like that is a real cost. That is a really, really, like, whether you have insurance or not, that is a cost, right? Not just time, labor, or anything like that, but money, right? Because we live under and are trying to survive under capitalism, right? And that paints every aspect of how we move through the world, unfortunately. So this is my favorite part. As a writer, I always make sure that I have this up in this form because I want to make sure that, like I said before, that if folks want to journal about this extendedly in an extended form after the jump, that they totally can. But this is also the part where, and especially because I was told we have time, we can actually make this a conversation. So I'll read these questions off and then I will put them in the chat to make sure that everybody has both audio and visual way to explore. But the exploration of today's conversation can be any one of the following questions or anything that folks want to ask me that has come up or whatever we want to make this time. Let's make this time be as reflective and as generative as possible. So one of the prompts is to think of an ancestor that is unknown to you for whatever reason. What would you like them to know about you? Another one is, where have you seen compassion in your lineage? Where have you not? Is there a place where this intersects? Where can you release feelings of guilt or shame around the lives that others have lived, right? I'm speaking directly to intergenerational trauma there. And then lastly, what does intergenerational compassion look like to you? What are the possibilities? So I'm gonna stop sharing momentarily. And I'm gonna drop those questions in the chat. So again, the questions are in the chat. Trying to think. Yeah, so I'll start to share and to model vulnerability with that fourth question around guilt or shame that other folks may have had, right? Especially when you're doing ancestral work, a part of it that's not necessarily as trendy on social media streets is around family trees. It's really simple. It's a really simple genealogy tool. I love it. But when you start to put the dates, right, and you start to do the math, sometimes you realize that there was a traumatic incident that happened or something that set the stage for other things to happen, right? So my late grandmother, she had 3 children. She had my Aunt Gloria, my father, and then my uncle Monty, in that order. Oh, my dad's name is Ronald. Sorry, I was like, why did I just give my dad's name? Anyway, there is a gap between Gloria and my dad. And first of all, I need to be transparent as much as I want to, right? Because I straddle this line of, and I'm sharing this in case anybody else feels this way, I straddle a line of like trusting the people in the space, but also I don't need to rehash traumatic moments to make a point. So I will say this to say, my grandmother was probably 14 or 15 when she had my aunt. And I did not realize that until my grandmother passed away, because due to the ways in which my grandmother, rest her soul, and my aunt, rest her soul, their relationship meant that I didn't know I had an aunt until my grandmother died, because she had created a narrative that it was just myself as her only grandchild and my uncle and my dad. And that was, quote, that was it, right? And when she died, a whole other tree, whole other part in St. Kitts, quote, fell out the closet. So for me, when I went to St. Kitts in 2018, right around the time that I did the Ancestors in Training series at Kadi, which is where that video in the beginning came from, I realized that I had to release a lot of guilt and shame around not knowing my family until people started to pass away. So that's just me modeling a little bit of vulnerability and also just sharing a part of how Ancestors in Training is active in my life as a concept. But yeah, does anybody want to answer anything else or make a comment, ask a question? Please, I'm a Sagittarius sun, so I can and will chat, but no, I would like to hear from folks, please.
Can I tell a story?
Yes, please.
In regards to like, I'm trying to go back to the chat and see how, I guess, how I've seen compassion in my lineage.
Mm-hmm.
It was last year, I want to say it was last year, but time is kind of finicky right now.
Time is weird. I say last summer was summer 2019 all the time. Like I skipped summer 2020, so you fine.
Thank you. So it was, I know it was a winter, and it was last year. It was definitely last winter around December. I was having a Reiki reading, and my grandmother has passed in 1999. But she showed up in my space, and I didn't know why. The person who was reading me was saying, you know, your grandmother's here. And I was like, yeah, welcome, you know, like, love you, thank you. And I thought, what I thought she was showing up for was not what ended up happening. And what ended up happening, like, the person who was reading me was saying, like, your grandmother's telling you it's going to be okay. It's going to be okay. And I was like, okay, boo, I feel you. It's going to be okay. Didn't take nothing of it. But circle next year, like 2020. Oh, yes, 2021. So it wasn't 2019 that happened. So in 2020, I was sexually assaulted. And my grandmother was raped when she was young. And it when she said it was going to be okay was because of that.
Oh, wow.
Something that was going to happen in the present that I did not know. And because she showed up then, and I was able to understand why she showed up, it allowed me to heal or understand what was happening. And it still allowed me to, I guess, heal a little easier, if I could say.
Yeah.
But that's how my lineage has showed compassion to me, or as helped me get through certain phases of my life.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that, especially for folks that have survived things, right? Like there's ways in which our ancestors show up to remind us that they have survived things as well. And that we, especially for folks who are descended from, basically, I don't want to say it like this, but basically most people around the world are descended from folks who have been impacted negatively by colonization, right? And that includes white folks too, right? Because folks, also let the record state, white folks have indigenous practices. It's just really far removed because, you know, the Romans colonized everything and we're like, nah, you can't be like this. So I'm saying that to say that they too, especially folks who are descended from the Celtic peoples in Ireland, like, yo, y'all have a whole pantheon that y'all can go, whatever, that's an aside. I say all this to say that most people come from people who have survived really traumatic things, really harmful things, whether it is a direct or more intimate ancestor, like a grandparent, right? Because it's not as far removed, or it can be somebody really far off in our lineage, right? Like when those moments come up, however they come up, if we're present to it, then it can be like Riverside. It can be a space of an affirmation, or there's like a loving touch, just to be like, hey, like we're here for you if you need us, right? So again, thank you for sharing that.
Thank you for providing the space.
You're welcome. Does anybody else want to respond to anything that has come up at all? It can be any of the questions in the chat. It can be something that you thought of when I was sharing the screens before.
Hey y'all, it's Queen Lynn. I'm gonna try my best. I was trying to type and it just felt so long, but
I appreciate this.
Just bear with me in my squeaky voice. But I am a clinical therapist. I work with DC Health, and so I really appreciate this space that has been created, and I love the intersection around intergenerational and folks sharing. Like, I also do social work and counseling. And so one thing that I am still exploring in my journey, and I would love to hear more from, and I think I want to say Elmina spoke to this a little earlier. I would love to hear from you or just anyone else in the space. How in your practice do you intersect the two? Say if you're talking about like a session, or if you're working with someone, how do you find the balance between the two? That's something I'm still struggling with. I feel like I have these two worlds that I'm exploring and I'm in, but it's like, are they supposed to come together? Like, do they, we talked about Western civilization and like how all of colonization and all that, and how that can be problematic. So yeah, I'm just curious your thoughts around it.
Yeah, for sure. For added transparency, I am in social work school part-time at Fordham. I just finished my first year, so it's about the first year. And when I wrote my application for Fordham, I basically said something like, I've been doing social work without the pay, so y'all should admit me, so that way I can get the coins and be able to be a little more upwardly mobile, right? Because I've been doing community organizing and like healing spaces and all these offering these kind of safer or braver spaces work for 2021 for 9 years before I even was in social work school. So I say all this to say a lot of my experience has been at that intersection, right? Of, okay, well, we have sister circle spaces for folks who have survived really harmful things, and we'll do self-care, we'll do this kind of healing, we'll do this, and this, and make it so that way folks feel held. But then also one of the ways in which we delineated ourselves was we knew our limit, and we knew when, okay, this sounds like a job for a licensed social worker or someone who is someone who can provide clinical support, right? Like we can do the DIY, we can do the on the ground support, but we really knew, and I'm grateful to, how old was I? I'm grateful to like 22 and 23-year-old me that was like, yo, this is beyond me. And I had that sense of responsibility and service to be like, if I'm not the one, like, please, like, get me to this resource and this resource here. And like, even with the slides today, you're going to get more resources, right? Because I really don't believe in being a one-stop shop for however people show up to seek service from me. The other most recent way that I dealt with that intersection was my previous role, and I mentioned it briefly, was that as a college advisor at an organization that will not be mentioned, but the school that I worked at, I was there for like 3 years. I still have a really good relationship with that school. And I share all that to say that the way that I navigated that intersection with my spirituality and my practice was I just kind of let my space speak for itself, right? Because all the spaces that we enter, and if we enter everything as a ceremonial practice, right? Like, how can I explain this? Like when it was gray outside or when it was a really tough week for my students, I would wear something bright because I knew that they would be stressed out. And I just was like, all right, like if I literally can't control the weather, right? Because this space is like, depending on who you talk to, you can't. But I was like, I can't control the weather, but I can create, and I hate this phrase because I'm using it from teacher land. But you can control the weather in the classroom. That's the phrase that stuck with me, that resonated with me. So you can control your decor, right? Like clearly, I love this color palette that's right above my head, right? Like we're in my bedroom. So like my bedroom is super colorful, super bright. Plants for days, I'm a plant mom. I was like, I can control the weather in here. I did the same thing in my office at the school. I had plants, I had posters up. Even if I had a whiteboard, it wasn't just black, it was insert a bunch of colors here. Even in the slides, you can tell, like that was just the way that I showed up. And like doing that kind of color therapy even showed up in how I was able to support the students by being like, okay, all of these important events are happening within the school and I don't know what to wear. So I let them pick what color I wore to important stuff. So like when I chaperoned their prom, they said I should wear magenta. So I wore magenta. For graduation, I wore white. Like it was a whole thing. But because I let them have some sense of control, right, respectfully, they were able to say like, oh, okay, like, no, Miss Veronica will actually be about her word, right? Because like I keep saying, my word is very important to me. And as a writer, I'm like, no, like I've gotten too many readings around like, mind what you say because it'll happen. So explaining that part of my character to the students that I was in service to was, okay, let's play what color does Miss Veronica wear to insert event here game? And they were like, what? And I was like, no, I'm being completely serious. Like let's play a game. And I let them vote on the color scheme or anything like that. But also in my room was things that I still have in my room. Like, so essential oil. I particularly used lavender with them because they were always, by the time they reached my room and by the time I had built a really safer space for them, and especially on my half of the room, they would come to me when they were done with all their stuff, right? So like, especially for anyone who has worked with high school youth, you know that if they don't have to be in the space, they won't. The second the bell rings for whatever, they're gone, right? They're going to do whatever they want to do, get into whatever they're going to get into, right? But for the youth that chose to stay with me and like eat lunch with me, chitter chatter with me about whatever was on their mind that did not have to do with financial aid, they knew that they could literally drop in, pick up the lavender oil on my desk and just be like Miss Veronica, like these teachers, and they would just tap themselves with the oil. They're just like, Miss Veronica, you don't understand these adults. I'm like, we're not going to talk about my colleagues. However, if you're stressed out, you can do exactly what you just said, drop in. You need to be quiet. You need to take a nap. Just don't cut. The one thing I had to do with them is set boundaries around cutting classes strategically because they got pretty smart. But I say all that to say, my practice showed up there indirectly because that's just how I am. And I bring my full self to any space that I interact with, right? Now, does that mean that I was saying, oh, I got a reading from this Babala on this day? No, that's not what that meant with my students, right? But I paid attention to my students who I would say are empathic or that had those kind of gifts, and I would make a note of it, and I would just strategically just be like, yeah, you should get lavender oil, or like, are you into crystals? Like, you might want some black tourmaline. Like, just put it in your pocket. Or I would lend out the crystals that I had, right? I would just be like, here, just hold on to this, give it back to me at the end of the day. Like, that's how I would do it. But again, I say all this to say, especially in terms of clinical work, I am not a social worker yet. And I was doing that in terms of what some other folks would call social work without the title, right? And a lot of the relationships that I had with those students was not because of how I helped them with their financial aid. No, it's because some days they would come in there and be like, you're a better social worker than the actual social worker in the building. And I was like, wait a minute, no, but it's more so about what happens when you bring your full self and you're authentic, especially when working with youth. If you're not authentic when working with youth, they will suss that out in like 2 seconds. I can go on about working with youth because I miss that work very much. But I hope that answered your question around how do you straddle the line? Because that's my long-winded way of saying continue to be yourself, but also be strategic about it. Yeah.
And I just also want to thank you for sharing. Thank you, Queenly, for sharing. Thank you, Veronica, for asking. I also just want to share something that Little Spotted Horse, our singer for today, shared in one of our previous IMHANI events, a Sankofa event we had over the summer, about how, like, from an Indigenous perspective, some of these Indigenous healing methods that you're talking about, the colors, the oils, the energy of a room, like those types of things, right? You don't have to call that spiritual. You don't have to call that a Babalawo showed it to me, because, and in these Indigenous cultures, they didn't call it that because it's just an embodied understanding. So then you don't have to label it that when you're like working with people. And I also want to invite people to understand ancestor veneration takes a lot of forms. It's not always, and I know, Queen Lynn, I know you know this too, but just in terms of like a school setting or academic settings, or in more clinical professional settings, hospital, whatever, it's not always, oh, I need to like put this sacrifice of food on the altar and blah, 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 or whatever, right? Sometimes it is just, it's honoring. That's what it is, showing worth, and that you worth and value these people. And an example that I like to give of somebody who I think was doing ancestor work, but we may not call it that, but he's in that realm now, is Chadwick Boseman. Why do I say this? Because he wasn't, out here doing rituals or whatever on TV or whatever, but it's like he intentionally chose to tell stories of our ancestors. He's like, I'm going to talk about Jackie Robinson. I'm going to talk about, James Brown. I'm going to talk about African-centered stuff like we saw in Wakanda, right? Like, there was a part of his career where he was being shown those stereotypical roles of like the black person, the black man who doesn't have a father figure, who sells drugs and who's always aggressive and blah, blah, blah. And it's just like, he had to fight with that and stand up to directors. And he went through a long time of not being able to find work because of that. And so the ancestor veneration for him is showing up through performance, through art. So like during opportunities like a Black History Month, at work or school or whatever, taking time to honor these ancestors, to post pictures of them, to play their music or whatever the case is, that is a good time. That's a good way of ancestor veneration, of doing like libations in a way, even if you aren't, pouring water in a tree and having a babalawo pray over whatever. So I just wanted to let people know ancestor veneration it takes so many forms, and some people are connected to ancestors and they don't even realize it. If you have a passion to build cars and build railroads and you're adopted and you don't even know who your ancestors are, and then, you go get a mediumship reading and then all of a sudden it's like, did you know that your great so-and-so like invented this machine that makes cars go stronger or makes what? So it's like the veneration can even show up in your work life sometimes and stuff like that. It can take so many forms. I feel like I'm talking a lot, but yeah.
I also just want to because Chadwick Boseman came up, I want to name that in conjunction with what KR shared in the chat around the whiteness of needing to label or put words to everything, right? Like there is a power in things just existing and being able to look at it in a particular way and just be like, yes, right? So I would argue that Chadwick Boseman definitely was, when he was still alive, was an ancestor in training, because he knew, right? I'm sorry, for folks who do not know this, I'm putting a qualifier, like, sorry, spoiler alert. He knew that he was sick. He knew that his time was limited. Like he was going through cancer treatments while shooting Black Panther, while shooting some of the Avengers, well, not just some, all of the Avenger appearances and all the Captain America appearances. He knew that there was a chance that he was going to pass away, but he still did the work, and he was still the best him that he could be, right? Like what he did. So long story short, he did the most with his time while he was on this side of the earth. Like I like boo-hoo cried when he passed away. Like I knew the man, but these hands are, speaking of youth, right? Because they're always doing TikTok dances. Does anybody have anything else that they want to share really quickly that came up? Also, while I'm doing that and also making that space for whoever wants to speak, here is the link to the slides before I forget.
Thank you for bringing that up. I just wanted to say too that like doing social work and being in that clinical space, you know, you have your clients come, and I did a lot of DV crisis counseling, all of those things. I work with youth as well. And you're absolutely right. They know when you're bullshitting and you're giving them all that fake energy, they feel it, right? And your clients do too. And especially if you're a person of color, you know, your clients will trust you and will open up. Like I've had clients who tell me like, you know, I've read my cards for this person in this situation. And I was in that lucky opportunity that I didn't need to ignore that client's reality. And I could say, yeah, that's okay. That's totally normal. And still work through that client with whatever issue she was having, right? And again, it can look, it doesn't always have to be like, you know, oh, we're building this altar, but it can also be that, right? Don't be afraid to create those spaces, right? Because we're afraid to create those spaces because we feel like they're taboo. You know, I'm that person where like I'm not hiding no matter where I'm at. Right? If I'm in school, y'all know I'm gonna come with my lickets, you know, like, you're gonna know who I am. And again, it's like what Veronica was saying, yes, adorn yourself, because when people see, like maybe they'll see those lickets and ask about that, right? And that'll bring up the conversation. And it will open up the space for those folks to feel like we can talk about it. And if you're super clinical, I practice this in everything, right? Like if you're used to seeing enneagrams, and when you're mapping, again, like what's going on in your ancestry, because we do this in psychology, but we just need all of these categorizations that we're saying. We do this, right? We just need to know how to decolonize that, how to hold that space for when you don't need words, right? Like when energy is speaking, right? And that's you doing that work in whatever space you're in. But at the end of the day, you know, I think that the decision is always up to you. Like, do you want to be in that space and decolonize, right? Or you just want to be, or are you that person that knows no matter what I do, if I'm in that nonprofit, if I'm at this school, I won't be able to do it how I want to, right? And that's the route that I took. And for me, it was like, no, I have to completely move myself from this space, even having all these years in school and all these things, right? But I think that they can definitely coexist. We just have to decolonize it. But I just wanted to say that.
Yes, thank you. That is actually a perfect segue to it's a perfect JL segue. So I'm a pause here because we're like a minute over time. Linnea, that was really important. Again, the slides are in there. On the end of the slides, there's a couple of things. One, the ancestors in training syllabus, especially around like education and sharing knowledge, right? I made a syllabus because I was like, I don't know where I learned this, so how can I pull the resource? So boom, so you get that. Then also there are some resources that are relevant, particularly to the topic of intergenerational compassion and how to do that work, right? So there's that. And then 3, the last slide with my face, that was the one that got posted on socials, and this same picture here, right? On that slide, there is how to stay in touch. And also, because I don't necessarily do as good a job of this, if you felt so moved by what I shared, please drop a testimonial, because I have them and I have affirmations of the work that happened on socials. But when dealing with certain clients, right, they need receipts or it didn't happen. So if you would like to leave
It's the Virgo Capricorn types. They need those receipts.
some folks need the receipts, and I'm trying to do better at collecting receipts of how people feel about my work. So if you would like to leave an affirmation, I would greatly appreciate it. And that's my time.
Thank you. And no shade, I'm a Virgo moon. I used to like not believe in a lot of this stuff.
I'm a Capricorn Mercury, and I should have been collecting that stuff. I have a whole Capricorn stellium, so should have been collecting it, but I'm doing better now. So again, thank you so much to everybody.
So so we did have a shift in the schedule a little bit, because we started about like 5-6 minutes late, and then I was talking, we were doing our little intro thing a little bit over. So right now we're actually gonna have intermission before JL comes on. So we're gonna have what time is it now? It's 2:28. Okay, so we'll have the intermission and go do the intermission for like about 10 minutes. So we'll come back at 2:40, and then at 2:40, I will make a brief announcement just for about 5 minutes or so about Beautiful Mind Foundation, who sponsored this event, and some of their goals, and then JL will go. So we are taking a break now until 2:40, and then at 2:55, JL will go on. So thank you.
And Veronica, can you make me the host again? Do you know how to do it?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, thank you.